whereas this is to prevent the health of all Jamaicans and reduce the magnitude of the cost to the healthcare system, allow persons to be healthy enough to perform their jobs and carry out other economic activity. The effect of these governmental measures have been also to reduce to some extent the economic activity and the loss of some jobs. We are aware that this can have adverse consequences where persons cannot repay their bank loans. In this context, regulation and supervision of financial institutions and deposit protection systems have heightened their vigilance and public presence to seek to ensure safety and soundness of the financial system and the confidence of the public at this time. Notwithstanding this economic outlook, banks, building societies, and the merchant banks, insured by the JDIC, have at this time remained solvent and adequately capitalized. The regulatory authorities continue to take steps within its power to ensure that this remains the case, even as uncertainty continues in the economy where necessary COVID-19 mitigation steps are being taken. Similarly, JDIC continues collaboration with the regulatory authorities to proactively monitor the system and works purposefully to ensure that it stands ready to respond to any impact on its members' institution. Since the establishment of the Jamaica Deposit Insurance Scheme, there has been no call on the insurance fund. No bank has failed. This has allowed the JDIC to continuously enhance and strengthen its bank's resolution capabilities and capacity. Initiatives to support this include the implementation of reforms geared toward enhancing the legal framework for the resolution of deposit-taking institutions, the maintenance of robust deposit reimbursement framework, including a fully automation of the depositors' reimbursement processes. Therefore, the corporation continues to work closely with its financial system safety net partners, that is, the Ministry of Finance, the Bank of Jamaica, and the Financial Services Commission, to develop legislations aimed at strengthening the capacity of the regulatory authorities to take orderly and timely actions in resolving non-viable regulated financial institutions. Another reform being pursued include credit unions being subject to the BOJ license supervision regime, bringing the credit union into the deposit insurance scheme. The JDIC remains committed to ensuring that depositors will be reimbursed if their bank, building society, or merchant bank, and in the future credit union, fails and cannot pay their depositors. The protection of depositors begins with the soundness of the financial system. We also commit to work with the Bank of Jamaica as the regulatory authority for banks and with other financial system safety net towards maintaining a sound financial system and, by extension, the protection of our depositors. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your patience in listening, and I will now pass you over to your Chief Executive Officer, who will explain further the level of deposit insurance at the new limit and any other matters that she will be, and the members of the team on the platform will be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, Mrs. Myrtle Halsall, for giving that very nice overview for our depositors and the public. Okay, so now you know you've been upgraded to, your deposits have been upgraded to coverage of $1,200,000, or sometimes just said as this, $1.2 million. Now, who is it that is covered up to the limit of $1,200,000? It is depositors in commercial banks, building societies, and merchant banks. With the passing of new law that is expected to happen not too long from now, persons who have deposits in credit unions will also be protected up to the amount of $1.2 million. Now, this doesn't mean that if your bank fails, you get $1.2 million. What it means is if you have deposits in those institutions up to that amount of $1.2 million, you'll be able to get that. If you have deposits that are over $1.2 million, that is deposits that are greater than $1.2 million, you may be able to recover more than $1.2 million once the institution is wound up and its assets are sold and distributed to those who are in line to get the distributions from a wound-up bank. So those are the persons who are entitled to deposit insurance. So they should encourage you, therefore, to save in your commercial banks, building societies, and merchant banks, and as well your credit unions. Now, the other thing you might want to know is when we say this $1.2 million is available per depositor, per institution, what do we mean? Well, each bank, building society, merchant bank in Jamaica is an institution. So if you have deposits in each of the banks, or more than one of them, each deposit you have in that bank is covered up to $1,200,000. So that's what we mean by per institution. No, what do we mean by per depositor? Because we say the coverage is $1,200,000 per depositor per institution. What we mean by per depositor is the legal status of each depositor. So we're not going to get into law here, but you do know if you have deposits, you would be familiar that you hold your deposits as an individual. That is, only your name is on that deposit account. You also know that you can hold your deposits as a joint account with members of your family, relatives, friends, and even strangers. Under the deposit insurance scheme, that joint account is another depositor that is also entitled to $1,200,000. And I'll tell you more. If you hold a joint account with another, and you also hold another joint account with someone different from the first joint account, that's a separate account for the purpose of the deposit insurance payment of $1,200,000. So let me break it down a little more. If you have two individual accounts at one bank, Bank A, those individual accounts are combined for the purpose of deposit insurance payments, and the combined funds in those two individual accounts are insured up to $1,200,000. If you have two or more joint accounts, which are in your name and the name of another, but you have two of those in the same names, yours and that other person, those are also two separate accounts, but they will be combined for the purpose of deposit insurance, and those two accounts together will have deposit insurance coverage of up to $1.2 million. But if you have the joint account, two joint accounts or more in your name and the names of different persons, each of those joint accounts are different accounts, and each is entitled to deposit insurance coverage of $1,200,000. So, effectively, if you had an individual account in your name only and a joint account in your name and, say, your child's name, and those accounts each have $1,200,000 or less, you would be entitled to deposit insurance coverage on each. So let's keep it simple. If you had $1,200,000 in the individual account and in the joint account, you would be entitled to deposit insurance coverage of $2,400,000. So it's good to really understand the deposit insurance scheme so that when you are setting up opening your deposit accounts, you know how you could actually maximize the coverage that you would get in the event that your bank fails and is unable to pay you. There are other accounts that are also covered under the deposit insurance schemes, and these are important accounts, in particular for small traders who have registered under the Business Names Act and persons who have registered on the Companies Act, because the accounts you set up with your company that is registered under the Companies Act, or your business that is registered under the Business Names Act, is also subject to having deposit insurance coverage separately from you, the individual, who may own the company or the business. So your business, your companies and your businesses are subject to having deposit insurance coverage up to $1,200,000. There's also another type of account that is covered under the deposit insurance scheme, and that's called a trust account. Now, I remember back in the old days, there was an account called In Trust For, and that would have been a separate account from your individual account. Now, you might not see the words In Trust For on an account, but you may be a beneficiary under an account that is set up by another person. For example, one that is well known to lawyers and their clients is the lawyer's trust account. So in the bank, the lawyer's name would be on the account, but there are persons who the money in the account actually belongs to, the attorney's clients. Those clients are subject to having deposit insurance of $1,200,000 each. So that's what we call a trust account, one where someone holds it, the deposit, it's in their name, but they are holding it for the benefit of others. So those others in the trust account are the persons entitled to deposit insurance coverage up to $1,200,000. So you see, per depositor means how you hold your bank account as an individual, as a joint owner, as a business, or the account is held in trust for you, the beneficiary, under that trust. Now, there are a number of trust accounts that exist in our banking system. As I said, you may not see them called trust account, but where, per se, a government entity holds funds for beneficiaries, that is also, the beneficiaries in that account are also subject to having whatever they're entitled to in that account covered under the deposit insurance system for up to $1,200,000. If all of this seems complicated, that's why we're having a town hall. So we want persons to call in, send your messages into the social media platform to get clarification. That's what we're here for. And we'll continue to be here for that even long after this town hall has ended. So you don't have to worry if you didn't get information today. But we want you to call in to get clarification on those issues. Clarification on those things we have discussed. Okay, the next thing I would want to tell you is who pays for this deposit insurance? Because it's not you, the depositor, who pays. No, you don't pay for it. It's a guarantee. It's guaranteed. You're going to get it. Not a penny. You just put your deposit in the bank, and it's covered. The day you make a deposit, that deposit is covered under the deposit insurance scheme. And no one can take that insurance away from you. We've guaranteed it. But then, okay, fine. So who pays? The law requires your banks, building societies, and merchant banks to pay to the JDIC every year a premium. And that premium is based on how much deposits they're holding in the bank. JDIC invests those premiums every year in safe investments. And a fund is built up and has been built up over time, and that fund is now actually $26 billion. That's how we pay depositors. If the fund is not enough for some reason, JDIC can borrow to supplement that fund so that you are paid. It is guaranteed you will be paid. Now, how does a depositor get his deposit or her deposit insurance payment? It will only happen if your bank fails. And by fail, I mean insolvent. And by insolvent, I mean the assets that the bank owns are not enough to cover the liabilities that the bank has. And as a depositor, you are one of the liabilities the bank has. So if the bank cannot pay you for those reasons, for that reason, JDIC will pay you your deposit insurance payment. How do you get it? How do you actually get it? Do you have to come to JDIC? No, you don't. JDIC uses the information, your deposit account information in the bank, calculates your deposit insurance payment, lets you know how much it is. And JDIC will place those deposit insurance payments that are due to you with a safe bank, and you can collect it there. There may be occasions where, if it's a very small bank, we may issue checks. But for the most part, you, the depositor, doesn't have to do anything. If you disagree with the payment, you can come to JDIC, and we will resolve it for you. Now, who else? I mean, how do we collaborate? Who do we collaborate with? Well, you know we collaborate with you, the public. all depositors, we have to, it's important. It's important to you that we collaborate with you. It's important to you, the depositor, that you know how you are protected. But JDIC is also part of Jamaica's financial system safety net. So we collaborate with the regulators of the banks, that's the Bank of Jamaica. We collaborate also with the regulators of non-banks, that's the Financial Services Commission. And we collaborate with the Ministry of Finance through the Financial Secretary. JDIC is also a member of the International Association of Deposit Insurers. So this is where deposit insurers from all over the world collaborate as well, so that we can all work towards building better deposit insurance systems for each of our countries. So there is a lot of collaboration. And we collaborate because JDIC wants to maintain and stay relevant to you, the depositor, the public, and to Jamaica. So for now, that's how we operate the deposit insurance scheme. And after this session, we are expecting to have a lot of questions from you, depositors and the public. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. McCain. Now, just a quick recap of that wonderful breakdown of how the deposit insurance covers the various ownership categories that you can open bank accounts in your commercial banks, building society, and merchant bank. Now remember, as our chairwoman, Mrs. Halsell, said, that while it is that credit unions are to be brought on stream soon, they aren't on board as yet, and so as of now, credit unions aren't insured by the JDIC and the deposit insurance scheme. Also remember that deposit insurance is free and automatic for every single individual who has a deposit account in a commercial bank, a building society, or a merchant bank. So it means that you do not have to hand over any money at all to the JDIC because your financial institutions pay those premiums for you. Also remember that if anything should happen to your financial institution, again, you do not have to do a thing. Deposit insurance is hassle-free. That is what we're saying to you. The JDIC, by virtue of the legislation that has been set up by the government, does all the work for you by collaborating with the Bank of Jamaica and your financial institutions. So the second something goes wrong with your financial institutions, that is, if it is that they're unable to reimburse you the monies that you have in those financial institutions, the JDIC gets to work, the JDIC makes the necessary arrangements and will either cut you a check or send that money to another financial institution so that you are as good as new. And remember that that upgrade, that big upgrade, now stands at a whopping $1.2 million. We will now turn our attention to the Cisco WebEx platform for the remarks on the deposit insurance coverage limit increase by the President of the Bankers Association of Jamaica, Mr. Jerome Smalling. And while, okay. Just another few seconds or minutes, ladies and gentlemen, and Mr. Smalling will be right on your screen. All right, and while we find out what's happening with that connection by Mr. Smalling, is it possible for us to just remind our viewers of the new JDIC TV ad, which officializes their upgrade to the $1.2 million deposit insurance coverage limit?
I save because one day my little business is going to be a big deal.
Yeah, and I make sure to put away a little something for him. Better safe than sorry.
And thanks to JDIC, deposit insurance protection on my savings gone up.
You've been upgraded. Deposits held in commercial banks, building societies, and merchant banks are covered under the JDIC deposit insurance scheme up to $1.2 million per depositor per institution.
The JDIC is big protection for every little thing that matters to me.
Now that name real upgrade.
JDIC, protecting deposits for you and me.
Because one day my little business is going to be a big deal.
Yeah, and I make sure to put away a little something for him. Better safe than sorry.
And thanks to JDIC, deposit insurance protection on my savings gone up.
You've been upgraded. Deposits held in commercial banks, building societies, and merchant banks are covered under the JDIC deposit insurance scheme up to $1.2 million per depositor per institution.
The JDIC is big protection for every little thing that matters to me.
Now that name real upgrade.
JDIC, protecting deposits for you and me.
Because one day my little business is going to be a big deal.
Yeah, and I make sure to put away a little something for him. Better safe than sorry.
And thanks to JDIC, deposit insurance protection on my savings gone up.
You've been upgraded. Deposits held in commercial banks, building societies, and merchant banks are covered under the JDIC deposit insurance scheme up to $1.2 million per depositor per institution.
The JDIC is big protection for every little thing that matters to me.
Now that name real upgrade.
JDIC, protecting deposits for you and me.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, while we sort out the connectivity issues with our WebEx platform, I now invite the wonderful Melanie Williams to deliver her remarks. Melanie is the Financial Inclusion Coordinator at the Bank of Jamaica. Welcome, Melanie.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me extend my thanks to the JDIC for including Bank of Jamaica in this presentation. JDIC was the first institution to actually begin the discussion around financial inclusion. And I really love the new upgrade because I am protected as a customer of quite a few banks, and I know we, the public, like to be upgraded. I mean, it's fantastic. So congratulations and thank you on behalf of all of us who seek to be financially included. So here today, I am going to just give the public just some general information that can give you additional comfort because you have consumer protection coming to you from JDIC, but Bank of Jamaica is pleased to extend to you additional mechanisms that allow for you to know what's happening with your financial services being provided by our regulated commercial banks in particular, which are a subset of deposit-taking institutions. So what are the critical elements for a successful consumer protection framework? As part of the National Financial Inclusion Strategy, we are working towards improving that framework, and already we have some elements of it in the existing laws. For example, we ensure the disclosure of key contractual terms and conditions so that you know the product you're getting and that you can be empowered in terms of making the best choice for you based on your own lifestyle circumstances, your own risk appetite, and what you want to achieve. There are also within the law now the establishment of mechanisms within every commercial bank for handling consumer complaints and resolving these issues. There is also, under the existing Banking Services Act, mechanisms for regulatory oversight of our regulated commercial banks. And we require our commercial banks to disseminate information on fees and charges to their consumers so that they can shop around for the best deal possible. And I'm going to get to that shortly, in the Deposit-Taking Institutions Consumer-Related Matters Code of Conduct, a mouthful, which is under the Banking Services Act, we identify the responsibilities of all our regulated deposit-taking institutions, including commercial banks. But towards the end of this presentation, I'm going to give a few tips to our consumers so that they can also recognize how they can protect themselves, because consumer protection is a two-way street. It's not just the financial institutions, but it's also the consumer who has to protect him or herself. So you've heard me mention the Banking Services Deposit-Taking Institutions Consumer-Related Matters Code of Conduct. So that briefly deals with disclosure requirements, complaints handling, training of staff within the commercial banks, also access to information in terms of what must be given and communicated to the consumers, and record-keeping requirements. I'm going to zero in on the disclosure requirements. Now, under the Code of Conduct, there are important disclosure requirements which have been imposed upon deposit-taking institutions, including the DTIs, or the banks, I should say for ease of understanding, the commercial banks must disclose in writing information on the products and services to consumers, as well as the procedures for handling consumer complaints. The matters to be disclosed include contractual terms and conditions, your fees and charges separate from the interest rates. And the disclosure requirements also speak to how do you open an account, how do you use the account, and how do you decide to exit from having that relationship with the commercial bank. Now, the disclosure of the terms and conditions must be done in clear language. We're trying to encourage our deposit-taking institutions to avoid as far as possible the use of jargon, technical terms that are really difficult to understand, and we are pleased with the response from the industry to date. The key contractual terms include disclosure of all elements, all contractual requirements for your loan products as well as your deposit-taking products. In fact, you may get a key fact statement that simplifies and highlights for you what you need to know in relation to these products. The DTIs, the deposit-taking institutions, must make sure that a copy of the standard terms and conditions is made available to you, the consumer, and they must also indicate the circumstances within which those terms can be changed. When it comes to interest rates, those interest rates must be disclosed to you upfront. Very important, especially in terms of your loan products. Now, the interest rates must be illustrated and reflected as an effective annual interest rate. And the cycle and the timing for the application of the interest rate to your account must also be communicated to you. When it comes to consumer complaint handling, accurate and up-to-date processes must be created within the deposit-taking institution, and they must communicate what these are to you so that you know even before you enter into that relationship with your commercial bank, how could you put forward an inquiry, because you may not necessarily have a complaint, you may have a question. How do you communicate that? What's the unit that you communicate that with? How do you file it? How do you expect the resolution of your issue to be addressed, and how long will it take? Now, what can you do as a consumer to protect yourself? First and foremost, when you're meeting with your banker, when you're meeting with that customer service representative and they're going through the terms and conditions with you, please read the documentation. Read it. You're protecting your own money. You're protecting yourself. Read it. Ask questions if you want clarification on any particular issue so that you can know exactly how is this product going to work and how does this fit in with my needs at this time. Shop around. There's a great song done by Smokey Robinson back in the day My mom always told me to shop around. You need to shop around for the best price. You need to shop around for the best services. Very, very key. In fact, everything that JDIC has done today has a song that's catchy and can be put in your memory. You've been upgraded, so they've upgraded you. And I know Beyonce had that song. So they have upgraded you. Remember that. So when you're being upgraded, you got to shop around for the best price and the best service and the best institution for you so that you protect yourself. You also have to carefully and objectively consider your circumstances. Be honest with yourself. What do you want to achieve? Are you an entrepreneur looking to open an account for your business? Or are you a young person who is looking to save towards university? Think about what you want. Ask questions. I guarantee you that there's a product out there for you. Are you a parent trying to establish a foothold for your child to become financially independent and to move forward? Again, there's a product for you. So I'm just going to wrap up very quickly and indicate that ultimately, once you have empowered yourself by learning more, go on the internet and learning more about what JDIC is offering, you become financially capable and you can now start to interact with the financial institutions with more information, knowing that you're protected in terms of what money you have with the financial institution because of what JDIC has done. It's now twice the amount that they had before, 1.2 million. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation, Melanie. So, do we have that situation sorted with Mr. Smalling just yet? No? All right. Well, it is that we work on that for your benefit. What we will do in the interim is segue to our questions and answers session where your questions, your concerns will be put to the able members of our panel. And to undertake our questions and answer session is my colleague, Kadisha Sharp. So while we await Ms. Sharp's entry, I'll just remind you of our panelists up here. Our chairwoman, Mrs. Myrtle Halsall, our CEO, Antoinette McCain, and Melanie Williams. She's the Financial Inclusion Coordinator at the Bank of Jamaica. And you would have just heard Melanie speak about financial inclusion and how it benefits you. And financial inclusion is all about empowerment and financial education and financial literacy and ensuring that there's an even playing field within the financial system so that every single Jamaican has access to the financial services that are available for their benefit. And deposit insurance is a part of that system because deposit insurance, of course, is set up for the benefit of every single depositor. Now, while we await Kadisha's entry, I will just ask Ms. McCain a question that I saw earlier. One of the concerns that persons always have, Ms. Mack, and we would have encountered this on several occasions, especially when it is that we foray outside of the office. Persons want to know how it is that they can maximize how much money they get back from the JDIC.
Thank you for that question from the public that Peter Gay has just articulated. You can maximize the amount of your deposit insurance where you have separate types of accounts, where you have an individual account and a joint account. You would be entitled to deposit insurance coverage on each of those accounts. So if you had an individual account that had in it $1,200,000 and you had at the same time a joint account in the same bank, that is, with your husband or your partner, that joint account would also be entitled to $1,200,000. So right there, you would be entitled to $2,400,000. In the case of the joint account, of course, you would share that with the joint share part of that with the joint owner. Similarly, if you had an individual account, a joint account, and a business account in your bank, each of those accounts, the individual account would be entitled to deposit insurance coverage up to the maximum limit of $1,200,000. Your joint account would be entitled to deposit insurance coverage up to the maximum $1,200,000. And your business account would be entitled up to the maximum deposit insurance coverage limit of $1,200,000. So right there, then, you would be entitled up to a maximum of $3,600,000. So that's one way you could have maximized deposit insurance. As well, let's just go to the joint account. In the case of a joint account, let me use letters. Joint account owned by yourself, let's call you A. And also, the other joint owner is B. So A and B have a joint account. But as well, you, who are A, you also have another joint account. But this time you have that joint account with C. So you, A, have a joint account with B, and you, A, also have another account, but you have it with C, somebody named C. Each of those joint accounts that you have, the one you, A, have with B, and you, A, have with C, are two separate accounts, and each of those joint accounts would be entitled to deposit insurance coverage of up to $1,200,000. So on those both joint accounts in which you, A, have your name, you would be entitled, therefore, up to $2.4 million. Those are two ways. Two scenarios where you could have more, you could be entitled to more than the maximum of $1,200,000. But let me emphasize that deposit insurance, the coverage is up to the maximum we speak about. So if you have less than the maximum in the account, that's what you get. You would have got you would have been totally covered because you're less than that maximum. If you have more than the maximum, you're covered up to the maximum of $1,200,000. And we could go on because you have a business account. That's a separate account entitled up to that maximum of $1,200,000. There you have 3 accounts, and each of them would be entitled to coverage up to $1,200,000. But don't forget, you actually have to have money in the bank.
All right, thank you.
Up to that maximum.
Thank you for that, Ms. McCain. I have 4 additional questions, the first of which will be coming from Mr. Michael Sharp from Jamaica News Network.
Thank you very much. I have 2 questions, so that make that 5. Where does JDIC get the money from to do this? Because if I don't have to do anything, and it's being done, it didn't fall from the sky. And secondly, have we had any experience where persons have had to have their money deposited and insured and they got it? What's the track record?
Right. JDIC is able to pay depositors from a deposit insurance fund. That fund is also set up under the Deposit Insurance Act that sets up the JDIC to operate. Into that deposit insurance fund, we collect from the commercial banks, merchant banks, and building societies annually a premium. So they pay us that premium. We invest that premium in safe investments, and we are able to build up that fund sufficiently to be able to pay depositors. So that's where the money comes from.
Any track record?
Yes, I know the second part, the track record. Fortunately, for Jamaica, we have not had a bank failure since JDIC was established. So we haven't had to pay out depositors. The financial system is also regulated by the Bank of Jamaica. That's the first line of defense for the protection of depositors, the regulators. The second line of defense is if the bank actually fails, not because of anything the regulators do, but simply because a bank is a business. You know, it could fail. If the economy changes in an adverse way, there could be. Okay, not often, but there could be. The regulators, first line. JDIC, second line. Because if it does fail, JDIC will pay depositors up to that maximum limit. That has now been upgraded.
Ms. McCain, I have 3 additional questions. The first is, who will pay for the increase in the coverage limit?
Yes, that one is really good. We increase the coverage limit based on a number of factors. And those factors include how much we now have in the deposit insurance fund. They include as well how sound we believe the financial system is, and we believe it's sound. It includes us looking at the level of erosion of value the coverage limit would have had from the last time when we increased it to $600,000, which was in 2007. Now, we have grown our fund significantly since 2007. And in fact, we have what we refer to as a notional target fund, where we want the fund to be somewhere between 8 and 10% of all the insured deposits in the banking system. And by insured deposits, we mean all those deposits that are up to $1,200,000. And what we realized is that when we raised the coverage limit to $1,200,000, we were increasing confidence in the banking system such that 97% of deposits accounts are fully covered at the limit of $1,200,000. But we also recognized that where we are to our notional target in terms of how much fund we want to keep, we were still within the international practices of fund targets. How much funds should you keep for paying out depositors? So even up to this maximum, because we have grown the fund over these 22 years, we realized that we were still within a safe limit of the amount of funds we have. Additionally, there has been a lot of work among the regulators, as well as JDIC, because we are a regulatory counterpart, as well as JDIC. Over the years since our financial system crash in the mid-1990s, a lot of work has been done to keep the banking system safe. And that work is being enhanced as we speak, compliant with international standards. And that level of protections from the regulatory, that first line of defense I spoke about, the regulatory system, is becoming better and better. In which case, we look at the fund, the adequacy of the fund we keep now becomes better and better. So in that context, we could raise the coverage limit to $1,200,000 without putting an additional charge on the commercial banks, merchant banks, and building societies.
Okay, thank you. While we wait for Mr. Smallin to do his presentation, he's now here on location with us. I'll ask you one final question, and then he can take the podium.
Thank you.
The final question then would be, how will the increase in the coverage limit benefit deposit-taking institutions?
How will it benefit the institutions themselves? You know, deposit insurance is to benefit you, the depositors, right? And as Melanie from the Bank of Jamaica indicated, this is part of financial inclusion. It's encouraging for depositors to know that their funds are protected to such a degree that they will save with the banks. They will save with commercial banks and merchant banks and building societies, and not seek to put their money in unsafe places, which could include, you know, your mattress. And, you know, we do know that there have been schemes that have not been safe, not been regulated, and we do know that persons have put their monies there and lost it. So this benefits our banking system as well, because this guarantee of protection of your deposits allows persons to save in bank. It encourages savings within our banking system. And our banking system is very important. It's very important to the economy, because the banking system is where persons can also get money from the banks to do businesses, to pay, to acquire things that they want to acquire. So we know that this benefits the banking system as well, because it benefits depositors. And depositors are key to the banking system. If the depositors don't put their monies in the banks will not have money to lend to others. So that's how it benefits the banking system.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. McCain. I think that perfectly segued into our next presenter, Mr. Jerome Smallin, President of the Jamaica Bankers Association.
Thank you.
Good morning. Moderator, Ms. Peter Gay Coombs, CEO, Ms. McCain, Chairperson, Mrs. Myrtle Halsall, OD, and Financial Inclusion Coordinator, Melanie. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Should I just say, Ms. McCain did in fact answer every question that I intended to address. So thank you very much, Ms. McCain. On a serious note, the Jamaica Bankers Association wishes to express its appreciation to JDIC and the regulators for having crafted this timely adjustment to the coverage on clients' deposits. I must say that a doubling of coverage is truly impressive, and all involved should be commended. This change is welcomed as it increases the attractiveness of deposits as a product in the market, as well as increases confidence of the depositing public in the banking sector. This enhances the strength and resilience of the sector and facilitates greater contribution to the growth and well-being of Jamaica land we love. In these challenging times, confidence is key to setting our minds at ease as the future appears daunting. Having peace of mind and confidence that deposits are protected in the unlikely event of significant financial fallout gives us one less thing to worry about. The banking sector has demonstrated its resilience over time, as evidenced by the navigation of the most recent global financial fallout, which occurred at the back end of the last decade. The regulators have put in place a set of very robust benchmarks, including capital and liquidity reserve requirements to protect depositors during challenging financial times. JDIC is an important addition to bolster the confidence of the depositing public, as well as to protect against unregulated entities that enter the deposit-taking space from time to time. This adjustment is also considered timely because it coincides with the amendment to the Proceeds of Crime Act, and a thrust towards financial inclusion. As you may be aware, the banking sector is responding to this change, and several member banks have designed special accounts to facilitate financial inclusion. This increase in coverage gives further confidence, as many Jamaicans who would have avoided formal banking accounts due to apprehension regarding safety of their funds are now confident that they are covered. As indicated by all present today, this is a welcomed change, and we look forward to including more Jamaicans in the formal financial sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smalling, for that wonderful presentation. We now revert to our questions and answers segment, which was going wonderfully, I might add. I will ask Ms. Sharp to return to take charge of that question and answers session for me. And while she makes her way to the floor, Ms. Mack, we will begin with you. Ms. Mack, one of the questions that came through on the stream, what is the difference between the deposit insurance scheme and the deposit insurance fund?
Thank you. The scheme is the entire system of deposit insurance. The scheme is the entire system of deposit insurance. So the scheme involves looking at who we cover, what we cover. The fund is that fund, I'm repeating the word, that was established under the Deposit Insurance Act, which allows us to collect premiums from banks, and we pay those premiums into that fund. So the fund is that body of resources the JDIC will use to pay out depositors in the event of a bank failure. The scheme, as I said, just repeating a bit, is that whole system of coverage. Who we cover, what we cover. So that scheme can also be enhanced over time. And on an ongoing basis, we do just that. We enhance the scheme. As you know, once the legislation is passed, credit unions are likely or will come under the deposit insurance scheme. That who we cover and what we cover.
Another question that is top of mind these days, especially in the age in which we live, where technological fraud is becoming increasingly rampant. Persons want to know, how does the JDIC fit into the situation if it is that their bank account is defrauded? How does the JDIC play a role in that, or do they?
That's a good question as well. JDIC doesn't play a specific role in the bank's operations. Fraud in a bank is related to banking operations. And as Peter Gay has indicated, technological fraud technology has actually increased the ways that persons can perpetrate fraud, because persons are always perpetrating fraud even before the technology. But the technology gives a myriad of other ways for fraud to take place. So banks have systems to detect the fraud, and if the fraud does occur, banks do have systems to deal with that fraud. Customers just have to report that fraud to the banks, to their bank, as soon as it occurs. I cannot imagine ever a system that could not be hacked and to be compromised. So I do know that the banks are very aware of this, and they have a whole operation behind the scenes ensuring that that fraud is minimized. JDIC does not protect. I think what you probably want to know is, does JDIC protect against fraud on their bank accounts? Yes. JDIC doesn't have to protect against fraud while the bank is operating on fraud on persons' bank accounts. The banks deal with that. Because remember, the bank also has to investigate the fraud to ensure that you are not part of the fraud. and trying to trick them. So the banks has to investigate. And they do have a very robust system of doing that kind of investigation. The point is, you have to complain to the bank as quickly as possible. So it means you have to be looking at your accounts carefully, closely. When you have your cards, your debit and credit and other cards, you have to make sure you haven't shared information on using them with other persons. You have to make sure you put these things up carefully. When you go to merchant outlets, you have to make sure that you are seeing how your card is being used, that the merchants don't say, oh, hold on a second, let me go to the back there and just run your card. So we all know, no, you don't do that. So in dealing with fraud, both the consumer, the depositor, and the bank have roles to play. Now, if it is that fraud causes a bank to fail, that's a different thing. JDIC would pay out depositors. But if the bank is a going concern, as I said, fraud will be taking place all the time, everywhere. But it's up to you, the consumer, as Melanie said, Melanie from the Bank of Jamaica has said, the consumer has a part to play, always, in what services it purchases. You know, and if people complain a lot about a particular bank, always losing their money or whatever, that too is a reason that you could probably change your bank. It's about you, as the consumer, making your choices as well. But you have to participate in how safe your money is.
All right, thank you for that thorough response, Ms. McCain. I now hand over to our communications officer, Kadisha Sharp.
All right, thank you, Peter Gay. Melanie, I have a question for you, which segues from the response that Ms. McCain just gave. If a financial consumer has an issue with their financial institution, and you can make reference to the instance of fraud, would it be best for them to go directly to their bank, or can they also make that complaint to the Bank of Jamaica?
Thank you for that question. So under the Code of Conduct, there's a requirement that every single deposit-taking institution, including a commercial bank, must establish a unit within the bank that deals with any consumer complaints. So we tend to encourage all consumers to first go to your bank because they have all of your information. Remember, there are many mechanisms that exist in the banking regime to protect the secrecy of your information, to protect the data, and even in terms of issues to do with a suspected case of fraud. One of the building on what Ms. McCain indicated, one of the steps we would encourage you to do is when you're opening your account, find out what are the alerts, what are the systems that the bank itself has in place to immediately notify you. For example, I just booked, I'm supporting our local tourism. I'm going to have a stay-at-home vacation, and I used my credit card. I immediately got an alert, and that's critical. If you, having reported the matter to your bank, the bank would have upfront told you what's the length of time that they require to investigate the case of fraud, in this case, or any other matter, and how long they'll take before they get back to you. I would encourage you to allow them to do that. Many banks are very timely. They may tell you, for example, 30 days or 90 days and resolve it in 15. So allow your financial institution to actually work through the process with you because they may be able to do a number of things. Freeze your card immediately, for example, right away. Invite you to come in and get a new card and have a new PIN put in place, even as they continue the investigation. So the consumer protection mechanisms kick in immediately. I have also used that type of benefit. You can still, if you're still concerned or you're not seeing the kind of rapid response to you, you can come to the Office of Consumer Complaints, which is in Bank of Jamaica. We have that as part of the Financial Institution Supervisory Division, and you can make that report to Bank of Jamaica. In one of the slides that we have, there is a link to the BOJ website where a number of additional resources are made available to you, including there's a direct line for the Office of Consumer Complaints to treat with that. But first time you have a problem or a complaint, go immediately to your financial institution, call them, text them, whatever means you have, and give them the opportunity to resolve it.
Thank you so much, Melanie. I have one more question for you and then a final question for Ms. McCain. The question for you is, how does financial inclusion benefit small and medium-sized businesses?
Financial inclusion, a critical pillar of financial inclusion is the MSME finance action items. In fact, we now have two new ministries, before it was one, a ministry we affectionately called MICAF, Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries, that's now been split in two. A great deal of the work in financial inclusion seeks to empower the micro, small and medium-sized entrepreneur to first of all understand in which category they fit. How can they open an account? So you would have heard Mr. Smalling speak to the work being done with the Proceeds of Crime Act to actually simplify or allow the financial institutions to create products, financial inclusion products that can then be opened using a simplified customer due diligence process, including just having your TRN and an ID. Okay? Now, it depends on the business model that you're using, whether or not you'll be able to fully take advantage of that. But that's one step. Another step with financial inclusion is because we want to get the entrepreneurs into the system, we're seeking to improve their own internal capacity so that they understand how can they do business. And in this regard, the work which is being done by the PSOJ Access to Finance panel with the support of Bank of Jamaica, with the support of other government entities like JDIC and JBDC, the Jamaica Business Development Corporation, as well as a number of other entities like Development Bank of Jamaica, seeks to empower the entrepreneur so they know how to do business. And third is access to credit. So think of yourself as an entrepreneur, you're going to establish a business. Who are you? What's your target customer base? What type of business model do you have? How do you want to effect payments efficiently? And can you repay a loan within the time frame as articulated based on the contractual terms and conditions? All of that is part of financial inclusion. Access to credit, institutional capacity development, how do you open your account, and how do you build a strong, robust credit rating so that you can, again, access credit? That's all about what the financial inclusion strategy seeks to achieve. And of course, lest I forget, secure transactions. How do you use movable collateral to support your application to access a loan? So thank you for that.
All right, thank you, Melanie. Ms. McCain, I have another question which came in from the media, and it reads, will there be any additional obligations from banks with this new coverage limit increase?
No, there are no new obligations from banks with the increase.
Okay. All right, that concludes our question and answer section of the program. I now turn over to our moderator, Peter Gay Coombs.
Thank you very much, Khadisha. I now invite our CEO, Ms. Antoinette McCain, to deliver her closing remarks.
Thank you very much. I thank all who have tuned in to this town hall, this virtual town hall. Would have loved to have been outside somewhere nice with a breeze going and, everybody, lots of persons here, but we know we are in the period of social distancing. So this is how we do it now. I'd like to thank our chairwoman, Mrs. Myrtle Halsall, for giving the opening, which was very comprehensive, and placing deposit insurance soundly within the financial system safety net and explaining this to you. I thank Melanie Williams, the coordinator of the National Financial Inclusion Strategy for Jamaica from the Bank of Jamaica. Thank you, Melanie. Always excellent. Really new things that persons need to learn about that is being done to bring as many persons as possible into our formal financial system so they can benefit from it and our country can prosper and people can prosper. And last but not least, I'd like to thank Mr. Jerome Smalling, President of the Jamaica Bankers Association. Mr. Smalling, a longtime banker from the Jamaica Money Market, JMB Bank, I'm sorry. So we thank him as well for representing the banking sector in this and endorsing the objective of the JDIC in this coverage limit. I would like to thank our moderator, Peter Gay Coombs, who is from the JDIC as well. Excellently done. So we have all here been able to emphasize the importance of deposit insurance and also to show you how you have been upgraded and what it means. I also want to thank very much the JDIC team who has put this on. Mrs. Madra McGrath, Ms. Kadisha Sharp, and I'd like to thank and Ms. Brianna Gibson from the JDIC in our corporate communications unit, and our ICT personnel from the JDIC. So, and the JDIC officers who are here today. I'd also like to thank the firm headed by Mr. Michael Sharp, who has made this presentation seem so easy for us. You know, we just walked in and hey, sat down, and here we were. We could focus on the important things. And definitely, last but not least, I would like to thank our sign language person. He has been amazing, and I will just say that normally I would speak very fast, but what actually slowed me down to a tempo that would benefit the public was actually looking at him while I was speaking. So then I was just going at the pace that I thought his hands were moving at. So I really like to thank him, and the benefit that having him here gives to all Jamaicans, including those who do not hear very well. You mightn't hear very well, but you definitely want to participate in the financial system, so you definitely want to know about the upgrade in your deposit insurance. So I thank you all, the public, for listening. It doesn't end here. Please send in your questions and your queries to JDIC by email at jdic@jdic.org, a very simple email, and at our website, www.jdic.org, and on Instagram at JDICJAM. Thank you very much. Let the questions continue. Thank you.
For him, better safe than sorry.
And thanks to JDIC, deposit insurance protection on my savings gone up.
You've been upgraded. Deposits held in commercial banks, building societies, and merchant banks are covered under the JDIC deposit insurance scheme up to $1.2 million per depositor per institution.
The JDIC is big protection for every little thing that matters to me.
Now that name real upgrade.
JDIC, protecting deposits for you and me.
And with that, that's a wrap on the day's proceedings, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining the JDIC's first in its series of digital town halls, where you are reminded that effective August 31, you've been upgraded to a whopping $1.2 million in terms of your deposit insurance coverage. Remember to join us to follow us at JDIC Jam on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and on YouTube, Jamaica Deposit. Take care.
I save because one day my little business is going to be a big deal.
Yeah, and I make sure to put away a little something for him. Better safe than sorry.
And thanks to JDIC, deposit insurance protection on my savings gone up.
You've been upgraded. Deposits held in commercial banks, building societies, and merchant banks are covered under the JDIC deposit insurance scheme up to $1.2 million per depositor per institution.
The JDIC is big protection for every little thing that matters to me.
Now that name real upgrade.
JDIC, protecting the deposits for you and me.
I save because one day my little business is going to be a big deal.
Yeah, and I make sure.
I'm Ben Wiedemann in Beirut, and this is CNN.
A new call to action today from the nation's former top intelligence official. Dan Coats says Americans need reassurance about the integrity of the November vote. He wants Congress to create a new watchdog to oversee election integrity. Coats writing this in a New York Times op-ed, we must firmly, unambiguously reassure all Americans that their vote will be counted, that it will matter, that the people will express through their votes will not be questioned and will be respected and accepted. Joining us now, our CNN national security correspondent, Vivian Salama. Vivian, at the very end, Donald Trump's name is mentioned in this op-ed. He's not mentioned as Dan Coats makes the case for defending and protecting democracy, but that part right there about that it will be respected, clearly kind of a message to his former boss.
That's right, John. A stark warning both from former Director of National Intelligence Dan Coats as well as the current FBI Director Christopher Wray today, both about the elections, warning both that the election is vulnerable to outside interference, but also we don't want to sow discord internally, so to cast doubt on the results of the election in November. And Dan Coats, who it's important to remember was also a lawmaker, really stressed the need for bipartisan efforts moving forward with regard to finding a solution to protecting the election integrity. In that New York Times op-ed that you just read, he went on to say, if we fail to take every conceivable effort to ensure the integrity of our election, the winners will not be Donald Trump or Joe Biden, Republicans or Democrats. The only winners will be Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, and Ali Khamenei. No one who supports a healthy democracy could want that. And so obviously he's really trying to stress the fact that everybody loses if we don't come together and try to find a solution, and also try to, encourage the democratic process moving forward. Now, remember, when Dan Coats was actually the Director of National Intelligence, he and his former boss, as you say, were really at odds over the nature of Russia's interference in the 2016 election. Dan Coats constantly blasting Russia for its role in the president trying to downplay that, and that ultimately put them at odds with each other. And so, obviously, this is a theme even today where we saw the current FBI Director, Christopher Wray, testifying before the House Homeland Security Committee. And he also was warning with more detail about the current nature of the threat. Take a listen to what he told lawmakers today.
We certainly have seen very active efforts by the Russians to influence our election in 2020 through what I would call more the malign foreign influence side of things. Social media, use of proxies, state media, online journals, et cetera, in effort to both sow divisiveness and discord. And I think the intelligence community has assessed this publicly, primarily to denigrate Vice President Biden and what the Russians see as kind of an anti-Russian establishment.
Now, John, I want to remind our viewers that a couple of weeks ago, the top election security official in the intelligence community put out a rather startling report saying that Russia is trying to denigrate the Biden campaign. He also said that China and Iran are interested or prefer that President Donald Trump lose the election. Still, however, the Trump administration really pressing the China narrative over the Russia narrative, saying that and not Russia or any other threat is the biggest one going forward in this election. John.
And the safest bet in Washington right now is when the president sees that sound from Christopher Wray. He is not going to like it, but it is candid and it is honest. Vivian Salama, appreciate the important live report there. Coming up for us, the World Health Organization sounds the alarm over rising coronavirus case count in Europe.
Tonight, Joe Biden, a CNN presidential town hall. Live from Pennsylvania.
The American people deserve to have it straight from the shoulder.
Anderson Cooper moderates tonight on CNN.
My name is Jason Boswell, and I'm an underwater camera operator and technical diver based in Cape Town, South Africa. I normally get to spend my days out in False Bay, getting to film all the amazing wildlife that lives in this incredible part of the world. Owing to the current situation, the beaches here have been closed, and therefore access to the ocean is severely restricted, which means that I now spend my days on the deck using a pair of binoculars to look out longingly towards the ocean. I've been lucky enough to see massive pods of dolphins, maybe 500 or 600 strong. There's seals playing in the kelp forest. There's loads of bird life. whilst it's been fun being dry docked on my deck and getting to look out on the ocean and see things from a bit of a different perspective, I'm really looking forward to the day that things normalize and can get back out there.
My name's Carol. I live in Santa Clara, which is in the province Villa Clara in the center of Cuba. I work for Cuban Adventures that provides some tours here in our country. This is one of the things that I love most in my country because I have the opportunity to share not only the beauty of this small island, but also everyday life in this country. The impact of the pandemic in the tourism industry in Cuba is easily noticed in our everyday life. Families, small communities, these minor areas that we used to help when we visit during our tours, they will be really affected because they won't have incomes or revenues entering to their business. But at the same time, employees working in the tourism industry in Cuba, they are now facing a great economic impact. But we are hopeful about recovering or going back stronger from this pandemic because you are impacted in our country by tourism, so we need it. And the best way to do it is to rethink a healthier way possible. So we are really conscious about the importance of being healthy respondent to this situation we are living in now.
The journey to the top for a successful business in Africa starts with an idea. But how does a concept become a moneymaker? African and global industry leaders share their stories. Saturday on Profit Point in CNN Marketplace Africa in association with Dangote.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
The World Health Organization now pushing European countries to keep quarantines in place. This as more than half of European nations seeing significant rises in new coronavirus infections. The totals are topping what we saw back in March. Let's go around the world now for other headlines with our CNN international correspondents.
Well, here in Germany, pharma company BioNTech, which is currently partnering with Pfizer in the efforts to make a vaccine against the novel coronavirus, has just announced that it's buying a production facility for vaccines here in Germany. Now, they say this production facility will help them increase their capacity to produce vaccines against the coronavirus by about 750 million doses per year. The CEO of BioNTech also once again reiterated that he believes that it's very realistic to think that BioNTech and Pfizer are going to ask for regulatory approval for their vaccine candidate, which is called BNT162 by the end of October. They say they're going to ask for that approval both with the FDA and also with the European regulatory body. Both BioNTech and Pfizer say they plan to produce about 100 million doses this year, about 1.3 billion doses next year, and they have confirmed today that of those first 100 million doses, at least a portion will go to the United States. Fred Pleiken, CNN, Berlin.
Here in India, the country has reported almost 98,000 new infections of COVID-19 on Thursday morning, the highest confirmed rise of a single country in 24 hours. On Wednesday, India became the second country after the US to surpass 5 million confirmed cases of COVID-19. It took the country 5.5 months to surpass 1 million cases of the virus and just under 2 months to add more than 4 million cases of COVID-19. Experts have criticized the government's response, but India's Health Minister, Dr. Harshvardhan, estimates that the decisions taken by the Indian government on COVID-19 have helped prevent approximately 1 to 3 million cases of the virus and 37 to 38,000 deaths. India has the third highest number of deaths across the world at over 83,000, according to the Health Ministry. Almost 60% of the active cases across India have emerged from just 5 states. The next phase of easing restrictions is scheduled to begin from September 21st. Gatherings of 100 people or less will be permitted for social, religious and political functions outside hotspot areas, but of course keeping social distancing measures in mind. Vedika Sood, CNN, New Delhi.
Here in the UK, 1.5 million people in parts of northeast England are being put under severe new restrictions to try to head off a sharp rise in coronavirus cases. The new restrictions, which take effect tomorrow, ban almost all in-person socializing outside of your own household. Bars and restaurants will also have to close early. The UK's second wave of the virus is starting to translate into more hospitalizations. The health secretary also says the virus is starting to creep back into care homes just as the country is facing a shortage of tests. The UK is doing more tests than any other major European country, and yet some healthcare workers are having to self-isolate for extended periods of time because they can't find one. Across Europe, the virus is making a serious comeback, especially in France and Spain. Spain just recorded 100,000 new cases of the virus just in the last 10 days. Madrid, which is seeing about a third of the country's new cases, is set to announce its own new restrictions tomorrow. Scott McLean, CNN, London.
Coming up next, why one sports columnist is calling the Big Ten's decision to play football the darkest day in conference history.
Resilience is a key driving force for recovery and future growth. Overcoming difficulties drives the world to become more creative and ever more innovative. Businesses, regardless of size and scale, never cease developing solutions in global markets as irreplaceable contributors. Japan supports such businesses, nurturing a resilient spirit. Continuous efforts fuel the cycle of technological development, and solutions are applied to every corner of society, foster the well-being of all. With the power of innovation, we overcome challenges and contribute to the betterment of human lives. Japan, moving forward together.
Donald Trump. We need very sharp people. Joe is not qualified for this position. Joe Biden.
Donald Trump doesn't understand duty, honor, country.
The most anticipated moment of the election.
Biden wants to surrender our country to the virus.
He knew how deadly it was.
He's following the radical left agenda.
Do I look like a radical socialist with a soft spot for rioters? Really?
The first presidential debate. Watch it live on CNN. Special coverage Tuesday, September 29th.
It really only takes a few moments to gain an appreciation of just how tough it is out here. They've been coming across sniper fire, gunfire, mortar rounds. You can see really just how intense it is here. We have to wrap it up right now. Quite anxious about spending too much time on scene. Those with the kids really struggling to get away.
They feel like they won't be able to outrun the war.
They thought the whole border was open. People are just trying to bust through towards what they think is going to be a better life. These nurses, these doctors really have nerves of steel.
You can't help but be struck by how interconnected our world is.
Arwa Damon, CNN.
We've had a lot of very interesting learning through the last few months. Our company has been used to flexible working and remote working, and we've been adopting the technology for a couple of years before this hit. Obviously, our distilleries and breweries are operating, and we put the right practices in place there. But what we've actually found on the positive side is the speed of decision-making, the sharing of ideas and best practice. There's a lot of good gains that we've also had seen internally within the company. So I don't think we will go back to the old normal. It will evolve. However, we also believe the importance of human interaction in work with customers will never go away.
I'm Max Foster in Stockholm, Sweden, and this is CNN.
The Big Ten Conference now planning to play football this fall, reversing after a ton of pressure, including from the White House, a decision made last month to postpone play because of the coronavirus pandemic. Joining us now, CNN sports analyst Christine Brennan. Christine, you're never shy, but in your column in USA Today, you're pretty blunt. You call this the darkest day in Big Ten sports history, and you say this is the potential chaos the Big Ten chose when it decided to sell its soul for a few football games. Why do you feel that way?
John, I'm a product of the Big Ten. Grew up in Toledo, Ohio. As you know, went to Michigan games all through my childhood, season tickets at Michigan football games, a Northwestern grad, undergrad, and master's. And full disclosure, I am a member of the 64-person Northwestern Board of Trustees. I played absolutely no role, had no votes, no input whatsoever on the decision that Northwestern and the Big Ten made yesterday. But the Big Ten has always said anyway, it's about more. It's about academics. It's about the fabulous research institutions that make up the Big Ten. It's closer to the Ivy League, many think, certainly Northwestern thinks, than maybe the SEC. And yesterday showed us that's not the case. That's not the case. The Big Ten chose football over everything else. The fact that the football players, John, are going to receive the rapid antigen testing. What about the fellow